Welcome to today's show. I am so excited about having Rich Sheridan on the show with us today. Mostly because, well, I've been in-depth reading his books, Chief Joy Officer, which of course is the Chief Fun Officer I'm naturally drawn to, and I just had to meet Rich. Rich is located in Ann Arbor, Michigan, which is not too far away from me, and we've talked a little bit about how we have some connections up in Lion's Head, which is not too far away from me, and he's got family here. So such a great honor to meet this author. And Rich Sheridan has been in deep with technology since a very, very young age. And he has a very different view on the workspace. And we like to say that Rich is the man who ends human suffering in the workplace by having more joy. So he's going to tell us a little bit more about that. And Rich, I would just like to know, before we launch into that, what are you doing this week to have fun, to bring joy into your life?
Well, we're in this pandemic time where we're kind of isolated and potentially lonely right now. I'm away from my team. I connect with them regularly throughout the day via Zoom and that sort of thing. But as I'm sure most of us can acknowledge, it's not the same. And so I'm very blessed to have two daughters live 1.5 miles east of me, 1.5 miles west of me. And I've taken up just in the middle of the day when I'm feeling like that moment where I need to stretch my legs and that, just walk over to one of their houses, grab their dog, because they both have wonderful dogs, and take them to the park and play with the dogs for a little bit, get out in the sunshine, see these beautiful fall colors we're experiencing, breathe in the smell of those leaves on the ground. And that really personally, revives me for the day as we work through all the issues we're working through in this weird, unusual, difficult time we're going through.
Well, that's great. And that is so important to all of the things we're going to talk about today. And it's just about finding joy in the everyday and whatever that looks like. Now, I do want you to talk about Menlo Innovations, because this is a company that functions on a totally different level than what most businesses have been taught and brainwashed, I think, corporate to function like. And so please tell us just a little scope on what makes you different from other businesses, especially in the technology world. Now I'll just tell the viewers that Menlo Innovations is a software designing company. So anybody needing any kind of software design can go to Menlo, and they will design what you need for your business. And just tell us how things run there that's different than what we're used to.
Well, I'm going to guess many people are familiar. They probably don't follow it as closely as I do with the Dilbert comic strip. The one that shows the Cube Farms and Wally and Dilbert always fighting with the spiky-haired boss about this, that, or the other thing, and kind of the dumb things that corporations do around, in particular, technology. But of course, that isn't limited in that area. We take a very different approach. We start out with that end human suffering philosophy that we have, and we take that very seriously. So probably the starkest contrast at Menlo to a lot of other companies that would even do like what we do is that we have this specialized group of people in Menlo. We call them high-tech anthropologists. And it's a fun title. If you have a business card that says high-tech anthropologist, you're a hit at a party because everybody wants to know what that is. And there's a lot to it. But at its core, anthropology is a study of people, and a study of people in their native environments. And so when we design software for our customers, we go out and study the people who will one day use that software. It may not even be their own employees or staff. It may be a product they're building to take to market. It may be an interface that their customers use to deal with them as a company. But we have to go out and find the people who are going to use this software every single day of their lives, and it's going to be important to them, and we don't want it to frustrate them. So the anthropology team literally goes out in the world and studies them in their native environment. And through observation first and then interview, finds out what their goals are, what their workflow is, what their goals even as human beings are.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if somebody's frustrated because they can't get out of the office every day at 5 because they have to go get their kids from daycare, and their systems are slowing them down, so every day they have to leave late, and you know, they get the dirty looks from the daycare provider because they're always that parent who's showing up late. We want to solve that problem. We want to find out, why is it that things are taking so long? Why couldn't it be more effective and efficient? Why couldn't it be easier to use? Why couldn't there be fewer errors involved in the process? So that's one piece of Menlo that really sets us aside, sets us apart from others. And then the other is the work style. You know, we're not unusual in the tech industry these days with an open office environment. A lot have adopted that. We've been doing it for 19 years. But when you come into Menlo and see it, you notice something a little different. Everyone is working to a computer. 2 people, 1 computer, working on the same task at the same time. Keyboard easily moving back and forth between them. They're in conversation all day. You might guess that some of this was problematic when COVID hit, but we can talk about the adjustments if you want. And those pairs don't stay together for more than 5 days. So we're constantly rotating people through the team so that everyone is building a relationship with everyone else. That's very important to us. We want to get teamwork really rolling, and we think teamwork is built on relationships. Relationships are built on trust, and trust is built on spending time together with other people. And so all of these things are so important to how we've developed the culture at Menlo. Mm-hmm. And so we've had to rework even how we do interviewing and how we make selection, how we do onboarding of new people, how we promote them, and all that sort of thing. So we had to change all of our HR practices as well. And we really focus on keeping the human energy in that room very high, because I think human energy might be one of the most squandered energy sources on planet Earth right now.
I would agree. And I want to ask you, if your goal is to end human suffering in the workplace, tell me a little bit more about what you saw or what you see still in the current workplace, because I want to know, you know, why is there so much human suffering in the workplace? And if we know the solution, which is clearly working at Menlo, then why is it so challenging for CEOs and business owners to make the shift? So maybe if you can touch on both of those, why there's human suffering in the workplace and why there's such a pushback on change.
You know, traditions, whether human traditions, business traditions, family traditions, they're hard to change. You know, changing human behavior is probably one of the hardest things to change on the planet. And if, for example, you know, and I will tell you that my life is literally split just about by business life, almost exactly down the middle between doing things the traditional way and doing things the Menlo way. So I have, 19 years on either side of that beginning of Menlo, where I can look back and remember what it used to be like, which was very strong hierarchical authority, bosses being able to just tell people what to do because they're the boss, and you do this because I said so. If you start trying to bring new ideas to meetings, those get shot down pretty quickly with, well, that's not the way we do things here. And, you know, we tried that 10 years ago and it didn't work, and we're not going to try it again. Or somebody was telling me today, they have sometimes there's ways. I remember my dad when I was young, if you asked him a question about, hey, Dad, how about if we, think about a vacation this summer to somewhere? Okay. And his favorite answer, which we 3 boys, I have 2 brothers, he'd say, we'll see. and we knew what that meant. It was like, no, we're not going to do that. But he'd say, we'll see. And I was talking to a gentleman today who said, yeah, in our company, that our version of that is, well, yeah, Rebecca, that's a good idea. Let's socialize it.
Yeah, that's great.
Right.
Well, Menlo, you experiment with almost everything. Like, I love that mindset. It's like, it's never a hard no. It's like, okay, you want to bring babies into the office?
Yep.
Okay. An experiment.
Yeah. Our thought on this is, let's take action over take a meeting. Mm-hmm. Let's see how things work rather than form a committee to write a policy. because those meetings just suck the life out of an energy out of an organization.
Amen. Yes.
Yeah.
So many people agree with you, and it's just so hard for them to speak up about it.
Well, and if you think most corporations, big ones particularly, they usually have a layer of management. From that layer and above, those people are literally human sacrifices to meetings. They're just running from one to the next, to the next, to the next. And everybody outside of those meetings is waiting for a decision to be made. And if you really want to suck the life out of an organization, have lots of meetings, don't make any decisions. And if you by chance happen to make a decision, just don't act on it. And you'll literally pull all the air out of the room, right?
Yeah.
And so we've just taken a very different approach to that. And, quite frankly, what it allowed us to do was tear down the hierarchy. We don't have bosses at Menlo, which is, I'm not even saying I'd recommend it, but the fact of the matter is, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with bosses and that leadership is the end all answer to everything, because you can have good bosses and bad bosses. You can have good leaders and bad leaders. But leadership isn't about, you have to do this because I told you so. Leadership is about influence. Leadership is about bringing your ideas up in a way that it could excite others to join you on that path. And so our team learns to do that over time, because that's the way they're going to help get the team to move forward on an idea they have. And maybe it works and maybe it doesn't, and that's okay. We don't get too wound around the axle about ideas that don't work. That's why we call them experiments, because I think when people hear the word experiment, they're kind of like, well, it was just an experiment. Experiments don't always work, of course. And we're like, yeah, of course they don't. Let's move on. Maybe you adjust. Maybe we change it a little bit. Maybe we try it a little longer and see if we just didn't get enough time to gel or something like that. So, it's just a different mindset and attitude. But what happens is people start coming to work excited. They're looking forward to getting to work rather than dreading the drive in and counting the days to retirement that so many people do.
Yes. Do you think that's because they feel more equal partners? Because I think, like, one of my questions, Rich, was going to actually be, why do you think it's important to grow leaders, not bosses? And then again, why is this mindset so difficult for us? I feel like it's because the person with the college degree or the university accolades or the engineering ring has this power over the people who are doing the work. And that's why we feel like we're entitled to that position. And so therefore we get more power. And I feel like that's a big problem in society, and why companies won't change, because the person that went to university and then I get to say what works and what doesn't. And if I'm not, then I'm failing.
Yep. Well, I think a lot of it has to do with, let's look at some of the classic HR practices of how do we evaluate people, and how do we decide who gets promotion and who doesn't. And typically that is based on individual performance. And are you seen as the smartest guy or gal in the room?
Right.
Does your voice tend to drown out other people when you speak? Are you able to shut down conversation because your voice is louder, or your opinion is stronger, or you've got a cadre of people around you who are willing to support you? That's not teamwork.
No, that's breeding the competition in society that is so, like you were saying, so old and so steeped in tradition, is to be competitive. I know as a woman growing up, it's always been to compete against other women, especially in the workforce, because there were fewer positions for us women. So it was always competitive. If you take certain cultures, extremely competitive. I have a lot of experience in Asia. And I don't think it's any secret that it's a very competitive culture because of the population.
Yep.
There's just fewer places for people. But that's what I love about Menlo, and this different mindset that let's not compete, let's work together. Your job on when you guys do your interviews, your interview is to actually help that other person come to a conclusion together, and how much are they able to teach and kind of bring along that other person, make them look good. We're never taught to do that. Not from the time we're in kindergarten.
Right. Well, that's why we actually say what we look for are good kindergarten skills. Do you play well with others? Do you not hit, bite, scratch, swear, run through the room with scissors over your head? Are you still curious? Do you want to learn new things?
Yeah.
If we think back to our educational lives, all of us, I know. I can still remember kindergarten. I can still remember how much joy there was in kindergarten for me. And it wasn't like I didn't enjoy school after that, but every year after that, it kept being more about get the best grades.
Best.
Are you top 10 in your class? Are you going to be the valedictorian or salutatorian? Are you going to get into the best colleges? Are you going to get the best grade point average there? And now it becomes far less about making mistakes. It's far more about being perfect in every way. And there's not, unfortunately, it's the weird aspect of it is there's nowhere near as much learning in that kind of environment. You know, what we're typically our education systems are teaching kids to be really good test takers.
Yeah.
But you know what's neat about tests, but it's different from the real world? Tests actually have answers. Tests have answers you can compare against. The real world doesn't have clear and cut answers like that. So we need creativity, we need imagination, we need invention, we need innovation. Every company does. Mm-hmm. And you know where that comes from? It comes from this really human part of your brain that literally gets shut down when you're afraid.
Yeah.
And most competitive systems, like, you know, forced ranking systems and that sort of thing, create fear. And now it's, you know, I don't have to prove I'm actually doing well. I just have to prove I'm doing better than you.
Right.
If I can prove I'm doing better than you, I'm safe.
Then you're safe. And it's like a fight or flight kind of thing that's happening inside the body and the chemicals within our bodies. So then I can totally see that as an entrepreneur. I don't have that environment anymore. But even when I was teaching full time, if I was trying to just please the principal by teaching a certain way, because he's at the back of the room, then that's going to stifle my creativity. And I know there's been situations, teachers everywhere will relate. If the principal walks in and the room's looks like chaos and all the kids are talking, you're like, everyone be quiet. But why? Like, I was always just like, yeah, they're learning, they're good. You know, I didn't really fit into that system, but I think it's the same in the workplace. Exactly.
I had that principal walking in moment when I started all of this back at my old company, Interface Systems. And we had started what we then called the Java factory at Interface, which was that crazy, noisy place with Nerf darts going back and forth and people working to a computer and talking back and forth with one another. And our biggest customer was IBM, and they had come in to visit. And we were in the boardroom with them. And when you visit, I was a VP. And when you visited with IBM, your customer, you had a white shirt on, a dark tie, you had a suit, you had shiny black shoes, you know, your hair was cut just right. Yeah. And you sat with those IBM execs and, you know, made a presentation in a mahogany panel boardroom. And in the middle of this presentation, our VP of sales looks at the IBM guy and says, "So Ed, would you like to see our development process?" And I'm like panicking. I'm thinking to myself, this is the VP of sales at my company saying this. And I thought to myself, Keith, you want me to take the IBM execs back to crazy land? And I thought, hey, it's your customer, I'm game. So I took them back. We walked through the quiet corridors of Interface, past the empty cubicles and the darkened offices. And then I opened this door into the Java factory. And it was like a scene in The Wizard of Oz when you go from black and white to color, you know?
That's awesome.
And I walked him around. I walked this whole IBM team around, what we were doing, how we were doing it, why we were doing it the way we were doing it. When we got back to the boardroom, he looked at me and he looked at the rest of the execs at Interface and he said, "Rich, I got to tell you, this is the most amazing thing I've ever seen." He says, "We could never do at IBM what you're doing here. Congratulations." Wow. And that was an interesting spark in my journey to eventually creating Menlo.
Right. Yeah. Now that's a defining moment. Now, were you ever able to work with IBM? And again, like, it always goes back to why is this still such a novel idea when you've been doing it 20 years? There's companies in Europe that have been doing it for years and years. And I mean, I because of what I'm doing, working with companies to actually bring this mentality and bring this culture in as an outsider, like, that's where I would ask you, since companies aren't making the shifts on their own, at what point would you recommend, get somebody in to help you? Whether it's somebody like yourself, a chief joy officer, a chief happiness officer, a chief fun officer, Bring someone in, invest so that your company culture, and tell me, if they did that, what would happen? What do you think would happen for companies if they invested like that?
Well, I can tell you a real story. It's in Chief Joy Officer, and so it's a public story. I had been brought in just to give a talk at Mass Mutual Corporation, 180-year life insurance company, and in the midst of that talk, I left them with a grand encouragement because I said, look, I know what happens. I said, you could get excited from what you hear from me or others at this conference we're at today. I said, but then you go back to your office tomorrow and somebody who wasn't there, hasn't heard what you've heard, isn't excited as you are, and you come up to them and say, I have this great new idea. And they look at you and go, that won't work here. That's against policy. We tried that before, right? And the idea typically dies right in that moment.
Yes.
And I told them, I said, I'm going to arm you with a simple response to that reaction. And I said, look them in the eye and say, I get it, but why don't we try something? Why don't we run the experiment and see what happens before we defeat the idea? And that can change things around. Well, let me tell you, I couldn't believe it. They called me back 6 months later and they said, Rich, we want to show you what's happened since you were here. I said, well, sure. What's going on? They said, well, you'll be amazed at the amount of change we made here in this 180-year-old life insurance company, $30 billion a year in annual revenue, tens of thousands of employees. And I said, okay, let's go see. And so they walked me around, and Amy Ferrero, their VP of claims at the time, took me back to the claims division, which is the place that processes life insurance policies for people who passed away and they have to cut the checks to the beneficiaries. And it's a big deal facility for them, right? This is about 100,000 square feet. They process about $3 billion a year in claims. And she said, Rich, when we go into claims, you're going to see helium balloons in the room. I said, oh, neat. Are you celebrating something? She said, no. Every desk that has a balloon taped to it, the person at that desk is declaring, I'm running an experiment. Come talk to me about it. Well, Rebecca, when we turned the corner and looked in the street,
I love that.
Yeah, there were balloons as far as the eye could see.
I love that.
And I'm like,
oh yeah, that's awesome. What a great idea.
So I went up to Susan and I said, Susan, tell me about your experiment. She says, well, I'm in charge of quality before the check gets cut. I'm the last stop. So I have to do quality checks A, B, and C. She said, if I find a problem at step C, then I have to go back and redo step B. So my experiment was, because the order didn't matter, I'm going to do A and then C and then B. And the whole process gets more efficient. Now she is just beaming with energy while she's
talking. The rules.
Right. And I said, so Susan, how long have you worked here? She says, 19 years. And I said, have you always been like this? And her face turns into a scowl and she says, no, I hated my job before. I hated coming to work. I dreaded the drive in. I was counting the days to retirement. I said, what's different now? She says, now we can run experiments. Now I can decide to do things. I said, what was it like before? She says, every decision we ever made, every idea I ever had to go up 5 levels, over, down 5 levels, and back again. She said, every single idea I ever brought to work died on the vine. She says, after a while, I said, I'm not bringing ideas anymore. It's just a job. I'll count the days to retirement. I'll find my joy elsewhere. She says, now I love my job. I can't wait to get to work.
I got goosebumps.
Think of that, one person inside of that organization, and I'm looking across at all these balloons across this thing. Like I was a kid in a candy store running around asking people what experiments they were running.
Yeah, well, and that's the essence of it. Exactly what she said. It was like, before I was waiting for retirement, and now I'm not, because I actually enjoy going to my job, which is what most, a large percentage of North Americans and internationally, what we do is we work. It's a big part of our lives.
Of course.
So my goodness.
Most of our waking hours, I think. Right?
Exactly. So that's a great story. That's a great story. And that was just from you coming to speak as a special speaker.
Yeah. And obviously Amy Ferrero was a kind of leader that was willing to take me up on it.
Right. Yeah. So you need that willingness. You need something that makes you want to change.
And I never said anything about helium balloons. That was their whole idea, right? That was their whole idea, right?
Yeah.
What a terrific way to do it. What a simple way to do it. She went out and got one of those big helium tanks, got the Mylar balloons. People would pick which balloon they want to, get it filled up, go to their desk and tape it down, and they could declare to everybody else around them, I got an experiment going on. And think of the conversations that are going on just among themselves. Well, what are you doing? Well, what are you doing? And it wasn't chaos. I mean, I think this is the part that the hierarchical authority has to get used to. You're not the smartest person in the room. If you try to be, the team won't move any faster than you. And that's a great detriment to your organization. And you got to trust your people. You have good people working for you. Yeah. They care. They want to keep their jobs. They don't want to kill the company. They don't want to do something bad to the organization. Yeah. And so I think, if we learn to trust the people who work for us, a lot of really good things can happen.
Yeah, for sure. And you talk in Chief Joy Officer about starting with purpose. Now, in the world today, we've talked about a lot of things, like from, children growing up and the way they grow up, and after kindergarten, we kind of breed this competitiveness within us. But I think by the time, we are in the workforce, we are looking for purpose. But some people will think, oh, purpose means making money, or success means the company's making, $1 million more than they made last year, or whatever it is. But can you expand a little bit on what you mean by making purpose? Because I have a feeling it's not what other people think is purpose.
Sure. Yeah. So I have this airplane model I use for as a metaphor for human organizations. So as leaders, we need to create lift, like an airplane has, and decrease weight that holds the plane down. We need to increase thrust, pulls the plane forward, and decrease drag that holds it back. So I equate lift to human energy. So we talked a bit about that. The weight of bureaucracy and meeting load and that sort of thing, we can lessen that. The drag of fear and the thrust of purpose. And the thrust of purpose is what pulls us forward and can get us through some really tough weather, right? Like weather we're going through right now with the pandemic. And when I talk to people about purpose, I tell them, first and foremost, it must be externally focused. And it should answer two easy questions to ask, but not necessarily easy to answer. Not as trivial to answer as you might think. And the questions to ask are, who do you serve? And what would delight look like for them?
Oh, I like that. I like
and
that.
And then I complicate the homework assignment and I say, I'm going to take your employees, your customers, and your shareholders off the table. And they're like, what? I said, yeah. The real purpose inside your organization is to serve people beyond those stakeholders. Because of course you have to serve your customers, your employees, and your shareholders. If you don't serve your customers, you will go out of business. If you don't serve your employees, you won't have anybody to do the work. You don't have the shareholders on board. You won't have capital to invest in new ideas. Yeah. But the purpose that drives a team forward looks beyond those. And so I'll give you a couple simple examples. At Menlo, when we talk about ending human suffering in the world as it relates to technology, what we mean is the people who use our work. We work hard and long hours to create software. And then one day it gets delivered. And then somebody shows up at work one day, sits down on the computer, and the new software has been installed. And that's usually a dreadful day for most employees, right? Because the software's complicated, hard to use, doesn't work the way it used to. They don't understand what I need and all that kind of stuff. And we want to delight them. We want them to go, oh my gosh, this is so easy.
Easy, yeah.
This thing's like I do. Oh, who did this? And they won't even know who we are. They didn't pay us for what we do because we built the software for their bosses. We built the software for their purchasing people or their IT people or their marketing people. We didn't build it. We didn't get paid by the end users, right? But that's who we think of every day. That's why we built that high-tech anthropology practice, because we want to delight them every day. They will never even know who we were because our name isn't on the software. It was purchased from us by the company that's installing it. And so for us, this simple idea of delighting the people we intend to serve drives our purpose. When we hear back that, we start getting the anecdotal report outs from the people who did pay us, and they're like, rich people love it. They use it every day. They can't believe what a good job you guys did on this. And we filter that back to our team, and that is pure joy for our team.
That's the joy for the team right there. But
and
now,
let me give you one more example, just because it's fun to look at businesses and answer these questions. So we had a life insurance company, a different one, come into Menlo, and I asked them these questions, and their immediate answer was our policyholders. And I said, okay, I get it. I get you serve your policyholders, but you do know that when that policy matures, your policyholder has passed away. And they're like, oh yeah, I guess it's the beneficiaries of policy. I said, exactly. People who didn't pay you for what you do, don't even know you exist till the moment of truth, and don't even know who you are. And then it was interesting because as I was going through this, there was a tear rolling down the face of one of the women in this seminar I was running. And I said, what's going on? She goes, Rich, those people you're talking about, we just outsourced our claims department to an offshore firm with the instructions, prevent fraud. So we're going to treat them like a criminal first before we ever get to compassion and a shoulder to cry on. And they were convicted in that moment that they'd made a terrible mistake and needed to change.
Wow, that's powerful. That's really powerful, and obviously quite emotional for people. Now, do you think that this, like the whole mentality of basically serving people, and I want to go back to this, but I've got like two questions. I'm struggling here. Do you think that this kind of work can be applied to any industry? So can we go into any kind of industry, whatever they're doing, whatever their product is, technology, socks, I don't know, balloons, helium balloons, and apply this kind of mentality so that they are thinking differently? So the lady with the tear in her eye goes, oh, we just made a huge mistake. Is it possible to make these changes when we have been raised in a culture of competitiveness?
Well, I think first on one side, if we look at the challenges organizations face, everybody's, in their war for talent and hanging on to their people and, out competing and that sort of thing. And I think we discover very quickly that money isn't enough to keep our people happy, and it's not enough to keep them on the payroll. They'll look for those purpose-driven jobs, the ones they're proud of, to come home and tell their kids about at the dinner table and that sort of thing, about what they do all day. And so you might guess that I've become a little bit of an observer of the world. When I see this out there in other organizations, I collect stories. Yeah. And one of my favorites is about Mike at McDonald's at the Detroit Metro Airport. I have this weakness for quarter pounder with cheese, fries, and a Coca-Cola when I'm at the airport. So I stop in at this very busy McDonald's at Detroit Metro Airport. And there was this guy, every time I went in there, his name was Mike. He had it on his badge on his shirt, older guy. And he was hustling around that restaurant, cleaning the tables like nobody's business. The stuff people carelessly leave behind, the crumbs being wiped down and all that sort of thing. And every time Mike got near me in that restaurant, he'd lean in and he'd smile and say, how's it going? Have a safe flight. Can I get you anything? Can I get you a napkin? And every single time I was there, and I was blown away by Mike, because I thought they are so lucky to have someone who can bring that spirit and energy to a place like this, right?
Yeah.
So then one day I go there and Mike's off shift. I was a little disappointed because I was getting used to him. And this young kid is pulling a sled full of garbage out of the back of the McDonald's, heading off to the dumpster. And he's pulling it right by my table. And as he gets near me, he leans in, he goes, how's it going? Have a safe flight. Can I get you anything? Can I get you a napkin? And I'm like, what is going on at this McDonald's? I mean, this is one of the most relationless places on the planet, inside of one of the most relationless places on the planet.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I went up to the manager. I thanked him. I said, this is amazing. And he said, well, thanks for noticing. He says, we're in a highly competitive marketplace. Any little thing we can do to create a differentiation from the other stores around here, people got choices. Wow. And so I thought there's two big things here, because I think this is important for people to realize. That manager, I'm pretty sure, didn't call up McDonald's corporate and say, hey guys, could you form a committee to write a policy on doling out kindness and napkins? No, he just did it, right? He didn't ask for permission, and it was free.
Yeah.
I never even asked for a napkin. Like,
yeah. And it was working.
Right.
Yeah.
And so the point is, everybody thinks, oh, we got to convince the top leaders. No, you don't.
No.
Just change your world.
Yeah, that is so key, Rich. Thank you for saying that. That's so key. And I have a story because I wasn't going to talk about this, but the other day I was just shopping, and it's horrible shopping right now with the mask, and you have to put the stuff on your hands every time you go into a new store, and I don't even want to shop. And I was in this little boutique store over here in Elora, and the girl there, she not only picked out some things she thought would look lovely on me. She was telling me about the make, the model, the stuff. But when I went into that change room and I came out with the pants on, she got on her knees and she rolled the bottoms up and she made sure the shoes were on properly. I was in shock because she was under 30, and that's rare. I was just blown away. And I told her before I left, I said, I just want you to know you give absolutely amazing customer service, and nobody's looking at her. Nobody's making sure. She didn't have a boss in there. That was just her. And that comes from within, right? And I think that speaks a lot to what you had said. Actually, you wrote about this in the book, leaving the campsite better than you found it mentality. That is something we lost a long time ago. And it's something, again, as a school reference, the children that pick up the garbage off the floor that's not theirs when nobody's looking.
Yep.
Those are
the definition of character.
The definition of character. Few and far between. And part of my mission, I would love to instill this mentality and why it's important and how it can enrich our lives when we're like that. I'm not picking up the garbage for you, or it's so easy to go, well, it's not mine. Mine. Or even with
somebody else is going to get that, aren't they? Isn't there somebody hired to do that?
Yeah. Or even
it's a funny story about that. There's a great other company here in Ann Arbor called Zingerman's, and phenomenal culture. It's a food empire here in Ann Arbor. And I remember one time Ari Weinswag, their CEO, is about my age, but they've been in business 20 years longer than Menlo has. And he talked about this very thing. He says, when I walk around town, I see a piece of garbage on the ground. I pick it up, I put it in the garbage because it's my town. This is my home. This is where I live. And that really hit me. And one day I'm near Zingerman's, leaving a coffee shop, walking across the street, and I see this bag full of garbage right out in the middle of the road, like it had fallen out of a garbage truck, right? And it wasn't a huge bag, but it was full of garbage. And I thought of Ari, and I thought, oh, I don't want some car to hit this and spread this stuff out all over the place and everything blown in the wind after that. So I picked up that bag of garbage. As I'm carrying it to the garbage can, I look inside the bag, and it's Zingerman's trash, and I thought, oh my gosh, what a full circle here, right? Ari tells a story. He's got me thinking about picking up somebody else's trash, and then it ends up the trash I'm picking up is they'd probably just taken the garbage truck to Zingerman's, dumped it into the truck, and as they're driving away, one of those bags fell out. And there I am picking it up so it isn't spreading out all over town. I thought that's kind of a neat little circle there. So.
I wonder if you could say anything to the people watching about, I think what we've kind of established here is that it really comes down to you as an individual, wherever you're working, whatever you're doing, that you can make a difference. Whether or not you have a public speaker come into your business or you hire someone or not, it really is within you.
Yep.
But what would you say to someone who's struggling in a workplace environment where it's difficult? Maybe the first step they could take.
Yep. And I think the easiest place to identify the starting point is also the hardest place to start, and it's here.
Yeah.
Right? And I had to change. I had to become a different kind of leader. I had to stop trying to be the smartest guy in the room. I had to bite my tongue so I could let others speak before me and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But I will tell you that the greatest change you can make is just simply to start bringing a positive attitude with you when you go into work, because it's infectious. And every time you're tempted to say, well, they need to do something about this, then change that phrase around and say, how can I begin this change? How can I be the change that we want to see in the world? How can I start with me in the hopes that we'll become infectious? Because I will tell you, even the word joy I have found is infectious. I can go into a room full of business execs and we'll all be introducing ourselves. And at some point they'll say, oh, Rich, tell us about you. And I'll say, well, I've written 2 books, Joy Inc. and Chief Joy Officer. And I use the word joy a couple of times. And for the whole rest of the conversation, I'm hearing everybody using the word joy, right? And it's like, I don't think they were planning on talking about joy until I brought it up. And so we can plant those seeds. We can become that good infectious agent in our attitude, in our actions, and become an example to others. And then what's neat about that is you start getting a few people around you behaving differently, and others start to notice. The world starts to notice. We get 3,000 to 4,000 people a year come from all over the planet just to see us. And we have become that kind of infectious agent in the world. And it's hard to deny that positive force that happens over and over again. And when I see changes at companies as large as Mass Mutual Corporation, and they're not the only ones I've seen this in, you realize, okay, it's not just sheer size. It's not because I'm a CEO and co-founder and entrepreneur and all that kind of stuff. This can happen anywhere
and within anyone. And you're speaking to all the CEOs out there. You're talking to all the top executives, and you're talking to every employee. Everyone.
Yep. And you don't need to change everywhere. You just need to change where you are.
Yeah.
A lot of people get stuck on, oh, it would be so hard to change everything. Then don't.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like that McDonald's story. They didn't change all the McDonald's. They just changed that McDonald's.
Yeah. That's awesome. So I'm going to wrap up here in a minute, but I wanted to ask you, so you're so accomplished. You're the author of Joy Inc. and Chief Joy Officer. And I do want you to mention to the viewers where they can, Amazon people.
Yep.
I need to go
wherever books are sold, they're available in multiple languages and audio versions and electronic versions if you like those kind of things too. Yep.
Exactly. And your link will be below the video as well. But I do want to ask you, so you're so accomplished. You have an amazing group of people around you at Menlo. What is your next goal in life? Like what would you want to do next? Even with the current world situation, what do you want to do next?
Well, we had some big sort of 10-year plan laid out. You can actually read about it on our website. And then, of course, just like everybody else, all those big plans got hit amidships with the pandemic and all the things that are happening economically in the world. And so for me right now, a focus of attention is just getting the company back to thriving again. And we established a 5-step pattern to get to that of survive, adapt, sustain, emerge stronger, thrive again. And we are well into the emerge stronger part of it. We're not to thriving again yet, but we can see the seeds of that coming. And so I would say right now, I kind of feel like an entrepreneur again, because we are rebuilding Menlo as we speak, because it's such a different environment for us now. It kind of got all pulled apart and put back together in a very different configuration very quickly. And I wasn't sure I was ready for that when that happened. And it took me a little while. Unfortunately, the team adapted faster than I did, because I just wanted to be like, no, it'll all go back to the way it was and we'll get back to our originally scheduled plans. But eventually I had to let go of those and say, no, we're going to be a different company because of this, and that's okay. So
and
the simple answer is thrive again.
Thrive. And so this is a rhetorical question, but do you think you will thrive again?
Yes, I know we will.
And I know that that's because you have a family at Menlo, because you're a family, you work together. And I'm guessing those 5 steps were thought of by the whole team.
Yep. And, and it was just, kind of, how are we going to get there? And, and I would say beyond the steps being thought of as a whole team, what they're doing inside of those steps, the experiments they're running, the ones I'm catching up with because they're going faster than I am, are just phenomenal to watch.
Yeah. It's amazing. Well, if you're sitting at home and you would also like to be part of this ending of human suffering in the workplace, and you want to learn more, please check out Rich Sheridan, Joy Inc., and Chief Joy Officer, both amazing reads. And just trust and know that you yourself can make a difference within your company, no matter what position you are currently in. It starts right here within. As tacky as that sounds. It's so true.
Be the change you want to be in the world.
Yeah, that's right. So thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me. This was fun.
I'm Rebecca Binnendyke. I'm the Chief Fun Officer, and I'll catch you next time. Thanks. Bye for now.